So I just want to check that you all guys has attended that demo session, right? However, still I will cover few basic concepts related to that cloud, which we already discussed in the demo session, right? So what is cloud, right? So what is cloud? So is it some server or what, right? How we will access all these applications in the cloud? So cloud is basically a platform, right, which provides you all the services based on the multiple categories, like in terms of infrastructure services, in terms of platform services, in terms of software services, right? So we have a multiple models of the cloud. So we will discuss that first, all right? So if I will see what is the definition of cloud, right? So whether you will go for any of the exam, right? So you will see this same common definition. So cloud, so one second. So cloud computing is a model for allowing convenient on-demand access from anywhere to shared pool of computing resources, right? So when it is saying convenient, why it is convenient? Because generally in legacy environment, if we have to deploy any application in the environment, right? First of all, we have to see the hardware, right? Whether we have a hardware, what capacity of hardware we need for that, right? We need a procuring for that. We have to spend money for a capex side, right? Then we have to see that whether in the rack space is available, right? And then we have to check that whether we have a public IPs, whether we have a public IPs, whether we have a switch port available to provide a connectivity. Then we have to see the power redundancies, right? Power ports connected because for redundancies we need two servers for HA, right? For any application, right? So all these things are mitigated by a cloud computing. So what in this is the reason of alloy convenient, right? Because we do not need to be worried about space, public IP, switching, power, hardware, basic platform, or the costing of that hardware. And in future, if that services will increase, then how we will increase the capacity of that server or the resources, right? We do not need to worry about this. So this is what it is saying, that allowing convenient, we do not need to take any approvals for deploying that. What we need simply a one user access of root. Through that we can launch that application in the management console, right? So whatever you want to do in the cloud, you just need a management console, and that management console is accessible over the internet. So I hope now you will understand this definition. Cloud computing is a model for allowing convenient on-demand access from anywhere to shared pool of computing resources. So last thing which we need to understand, that shared pool of computing resources means if you will launch your service, if you will launch your service in the cloud, right, you must ensure it's that whether you have to be launch this into the public cloud or a private cloud, right? Because of your regulations, because of your compliances, because generally whatever the services we launch, we use a public cloud, and in that public cloud, that server will be in the shared model, right? So shared model means this will be a virtual server. In that virtual server, they will create multiple guest hosts, right? So if you need one machine with 8 GB of RAM and six processors, six CPU processors, they will create you one virtual machine on the hardware, and they will align that to you. Similarly, one more enterprise company or client comes to the AWS, and they will say is that, okay, this is my requirement and I will launch one machine. So if they will see that on their ESXi or hypervisor environment that space is available, they will create one server on that same physical hardware, right? So how then they will manage these two servers for both that client? So whenever they will create any resource for the client, right, they will create one tenant ID, right? So that tenant ID will be the identical resource for that user or for that organization or a client, right? So this is what in the definition is a shared pool of computing services, right? So whatever you will access or whatever you will launch on the AWS, Azure or a Google, right? So that will be on the shared pool of computing resources. You cannot say that this is my dedicated server. But if you have a requirement that you want that this is my PCI DSS compliance where I will save my accounts, my clients' credit card information, right? For that, you need a dedicated hardware. Then you have to request to the cloud service provider that I need a dedicated hardware. Then they will specifically assign you that dedicated hardware. But yes, for that, they will charge you very high, correct? So this is the definition of cloud computing. I will read once again. Cloud computing is a model for allowing convenient. Now I hope you understand what is convenient, what things we do not need to consider on demand whenever we want, right? From anywhere, because it is accessible over the internet. You do not need to create IPsec VPN tunnels, or you do not need to install any clients, or you do not need to raise a request to allow that specific public IP through which you can generate a request to a shared pool of computing resources, right? So next thing I just want to explain why we want cloud, right? So these are some features we must understand. As I said, this is simple and really quick. We already covered that. Why it is quick? Because we just need to log in and launch that services. We do not need to worry about that network resources, power resources, hardware resources for approval process. Second thing was a small monthly fees, pay as you go. So pay as you go means whatever the services we will use, right? We have to pay only for that. So let's take an example, right? So if EC2, right? So that EC2 stands for Elastic Cloud Computing, right? So whenever we will launch Windows machine or a Linux machine, right? Or CentOS or Solaris, whatever the machine we will launch. So we will use this term EC2, right? So this is just like a server or a machine, right? On which we will install any operating system, right? So in Microsoft Azure, we will use this term virtual machine, right? And in Google, we will use the same term as a compute. The concept will remain same, just the names will change, right? So in our AWS, I will mostly use this term EC2, right? So whenever I will say EC2, you must understand that this is a server or this is a machine. The full form of this EC2 is Elastic Cloud Computing, right? So we were just taking one example of pay as you go. So when I am saying pay as you go, let's suppose I launched one application, right? Or let's a ticketing tool for my organization. I created one server, right? And my office hours is Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So I set one script that this server will be automatically up at 8:30 a.m. and will automatically shut down at 6:30 p.m. And on Saturday and Sunday, this machine will remain shut. So I do, from a payment perspective, I am not using their resources on a Saturday, Sunday. This machine is shut down. So when this machine is shut down, I have I do not need to pay for that Saturday and Sunday. And from Monday to Friday, I will pay, as he said, that pay as you go. So I will pay only from 8:30 to 6:30 p.m. Rest of are the hours I do not need to pay because I am not using that services. So this is the one very big advantage in terms of cost perspective when we are migrating our services to the cloud. So that is the reason organizations are migrating now their services to the cloud, because it is very cost effective, right? And as I already said that we are the next thing was no capex, right? So we do not need to spend money on purchasing of hardware, right? We do not need to be worried about the resources of the hardware in the future state, as well as in terms of initial state, right? Like if let's suppose currently my organization is very small and handling 50 users, right? And I am expecting that in 1 year my users will grow from 50 to 100, right? So I purchased that hardware with 200 users requirement for covering next 3 years. But after 8 months or after 1 year, I see that my users are increased from 200 to 400. Then again, I have to purchase a new hardware, right? And even if I'm purchasing one hardware, for that redundancy, I have to spend more amount on another hardware. So this is the benefit of that cloud. So we do not need to be worried about that capex, right? So we do not need to be spend a budget on purchasing that hardware. So that is why we are saying that in cloud technologies, we are moving from capex to Opex model. So Opex models, we only need to spend money on the operation part, right? So that if we are hiring employees or the cloud engineers, we just need to spend that amount on that engineers, right? We do not need to worry about that hardware. So this thing we have already covered: monthly fee, pay as you go, and no capex. And another term was scale as you grow, right? So if let's suppose you have a load balancer, and on backend you have two servers, right? And now you are realizing that the load is increasing and you want to put two more servers, right? So within that same subnet or within that same VPC, right, you can create n number of servers as you want or as per your requirement. So when it is says scale as you grow, and let's suppose if I have enabled the feature of scalability, right? If I have enabled the feature of scalability with that settings, that whenever my server CPU or memory hit or increase 80%, the threshold I will set 80%, right? So whenever my server will hit to 80% consumption, right? Automatically, two more servers increase. So it will increase two more servers automatically, right? Again, on with that four servers, if traffic is still high, resources are using too much, r- resources consumption is very high, with that same scalability policy, it will create more too, right? And I will also set one threshold that when my CPU consumption reduced to 30%, right? The minimum servers I need only two, right? It when it will see that okay, in all the servers, the CPU resources are using only 30%, it will automatically kill all the sessions, right? With that sticky sessions with that we will cover, right? So once I will see all my sessions are completed, no further sessions on that, so it will automatically terminate, right? So this is one good feature that we do not need to be worried about that load or the resources. We will just need to enable that scalability feature. And security is a shared responsibility, right? Because if you are deploying any services to the cloud provider also need to ensure that they are maintaining ISO 27001. If you have a medical services, they will confirm HIPAA compliances. From financial perspective, PCI DSS compliances. From security encryption perspective, they will ensure FIPS 1402 level of security, right? And last thing, easy less expensive to maintain. We already cover that why it is less expensive, right? And easy to use. Last thing which they mentioned, that reap benefit quickly, shorter lead time to value, right? This means that we do not need to be spent too much time to take approvals, to coordinate with the multiple teams like a Windows team or infra team to confirm their network availability for their public IP availabilities or for that power connectivity, right? So we do not need to spend times, right? So we just, whatever we have a requirement, we will go and we will launch our services. I hope this will be clear. So this thing we have already covered. What is on
Question, can I ask?
uh, can we discuss this by end of this?
Do one
Sure.
thing, Manpreet. What you can do, like whatever topic we have covered on demo, you can just please cover here as well, because there are the few people who have not joined our demo. Okay, so
Okay,
we need to cover like they are the blank. Okay, so just cover all the topics. And guys, we will take your questions by end of the session. I'm just muting you all meanwhile, and Manpreet, you have to unmute after that. Okay.
okay.
Yes, so you can unmute yourself and you can just carry on. Just and please cover all these topics. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, guys. So in this course, right, we will cover these topics in very detail, right? So when I will say these topics, so we will cover identity and access management, how we will create users, how it will integrate with your internal Active Directory, or if we are using any third party identity provider, how we will connect, right? How we will authenticate, how we will authorize, what will be the groups, roles, policies, types of policies. Then if let's suppose I have a multiple projects, then we will design that in within VPC, virtual private cloud network. We will cover storage services. We will cover compute services, how many types of compute services, which I said EC2, right? So how many types of EC2s we have, how we can manage their pricing in storage, how we can take up backups, how we can set the lifecycle SAN, NAS, cloud storage. Then we will cover load balancing, application network, classic load balancings, all in details with the practical. We will cover Route 53 in AWS, that is a DNS service, how we can manage that load balancing in that Route 53. Then software as a service, where we do not need to be manage infrastructure or a platform. We just need that software like Office 365, a Dropbox, right? So we just need to access that application, and we have to worry about the security settings. That's it. And then we will cover database service. In terms of database service, we will cover both functional, sorry, relational and non-relational databases. One second. Then we will also cover in this network services. And in network services, we will cover routing, we will cover access list, security group policies, how we can perform that VPC peering, transit gateways, how we can deploy network devices in the cloud, and how then it will communicate to your NAT gateways, NAT instances, internet gateways. Then we will cover all the security services which are covered in that security specialty exam. Then what type of monitoring tools we have, where we have to use these monitoring tools, how we can create alarms. Then this billing and notification alarm, how we can see if somebody will ask you to generate a report for that specific service or for that specific time interval, how we can create that billing report. Similarly, how we can design that new services in the cloud, what things we need to consider. Then migration of services from on-prem to cloud, what thing we will cover R6 model for migrating the services from on-prem to cloud, how we can migrate, what services needs to migrate, and what services we do not need to migrate until management will not accept that risk, right? We will cover that in very detail. Then the life cycle management and the compliances, how we can ensure that all the compliances are automatically implemented in my environment, whatever I'm going to create, or if I'm giving that super user access to my project managers that they can launch that XYZ services, right? If they are not fulfilling that compliances, then they will not able to commit, or they will not able to submit that application, or they will not able to launch. Then we will discuss that routing based connectivity, cloud formation and content delivery network for web services or for edge locations, multi-cloud pairing, transit gateway, design architects, right? So these all things we will cover. So in terms of security, what things we will cover? So in security, we will cover data protection, right? So whether it is on the infrastructure or in a platform or in a security side, so what data protection requirements we have to be take care, right? We will cover that data lifecycle in terms of classification, categorizations to encryption to identity access management, in terms of DLP, how we can take then backups, how we can destroy our data in the cloud. We will cover security from all three perspectives of cloud categories. We will cover that if any security incident happens, or if let's suppose anything is compromised in the cloud environment, then what should be your action, right? How you need to be handle that situation, what should be your response, how you need to report this to cloud service provider if this is your fault, and if you find something a vulnerability on the cloud service provider end, right, then how you have to report that, how you will manage that SLA. Then we will cover in security perspective, authentication and authorization, how we can integrate with the third party tools. And then we will manage that key pairs, symmetric and asymmetric key pairs, how we can store in the key management system, how we can manage that hardware security model, in which scenarios you have to go with KMS and in which scenarios you have to go on to HSM. We will cover the security from layer 3 to layer 7, network to application layer. We will cover all the AWS security inbuilt tools which are available. Then we will cover that deployment of third-party security tools in the cloud. Let's suppose you don't want to use AWS own web firewall, right? You don't want to use, you want to deploy your Palo Alto. You want to deploy your Palo Alto, then how you can deploy? Or if you want to use any proxy like Cisco proxy, then how you don't want to go with SaaS or PaaS solution of Zscaler or a Netscope, you want to deploy your own proxy, how you can deploy, how we can plan for that cloud migrations, right? If any existing setup is there in the cloud environment, how we can verify that risk assessments, or if any existing setup is running, how we can perform that gap analysis. We will cover that DNS load balancing and your application load balancing, classic load balancing, and how we can implement that security through that load balancings. So these things we will cover. So during this preparation of exam, right, we will cover all the exam topics from associate to the security specialty, right? So what type of questions comes, right? So in every topic, whenever we will touch, we will highlight that this question can come in the exam, right? So we will also help you to prepare in terms of interview, right? That we will tell you not just the definitions or how that tool works. We will give you examples of live scenarios or in the organizations how this application works and which diagrams, right? We will share you multiple links for your further studies. Again, we will cover that live example. Enterprise designs, how company implementing services in their environments, right? We will share our experience, and we will also share online portals for you guys to revision and for that lab practices. Okay, so this is, we have already covered in why we are moving to cloud, but still we will touch once again. So I hope we have already covered in that definition again that this is on-demand self-service, right? So you just need to log into the portal, right? Once you log into the portal, whatever service you want to launch, go to all services, select if you want to select EC2. I will click on EC2 service. I will click on launch with some settings, and this machine will be ready to use whatever I want to deploy, right? I do not need to take any approvals, right? Until unless if I'm not a root user, then what architect or a security team implemented that policies on my user, based on that, if whatever the services they have allowed, I can launch that. Resource pooling, like 2 servers are currently managing my service, and I set that threshold value on that, and if that load is increased, then automatically they can uh, add 2 more servers based on my policy. If I have set that 1 server at a time, then they will add 1 server. Or if I have not enabled that auto scaling policies, I'm manually adding that new servers on my same pool. I can, right? Broad network access. This is not a region specific access. I can access it from anywhere, right? Guys, just for your information, to connect to that cloud, mostly we can use all their services over the internet, over HTTPS, right? Second option we have through direct connect, right? This is a like lease line. I hope you guys understand what is lease line. Lease line means that if this is a cloud and this is your office, right? And you want a direct connectivity. So cloud provider will tell you that, okay, these are my service providers, right? So from that service providers, they will give you a direct channel, right? Direct line. So you just need to connect with that service provider, right? And even that connectivity will be ensured by a cloud service provider. So through that, your data or your access will not come through the internet, through the HTTPS. So in security perspective, that is more secure. And second, as this is a direct link, right? Like a lease line. So you will get a better performance and a better speed. And the third thing is that okay, you don't want to spend much amount on that lease line. You don't have that budget, but still you don't want to send your data over that HTTPS. Even this is an encrypted protocol, right? You are using TLS 1.3, but your organization has more demand of security. You can create IPsec VPN tunnels. Like with that IPsec VPN tunnels, you can connect. Even for some applications, we can install that their agents on through that agents we can connect, right? That, but generally we have a 3 types of access options, whether over the internet. Second is over the direct connect. So direct connect is nothing just like a lease line connectivity or a direct connectivity from your on-prem environment to the cloud. And the third option is through creating that IPsec VPN tunnels, right? And this is metered service. So when I'm saying metered service, so this is the same concept, pay as you go, right? So you have to pay only for what you are using. If you are using any Lambda service, so Lambda is also one functional services, right? So if it will generate 800 triggers in a month, right? You do not need to pay for that 30 days for that Lambda services, because this service was working for 30 days in a month. We will pay for that 80 triggers, right? So if that cost 0.000, sorry, 0.000020 dollar for one trigger, right? Then I have to pay for that 800 triggers. So you can count it, right? So it might be $1.6, right? So $1.6. So for 1 month, rather than paying that Lambda service for that 30 days running 24/7, right? If I am using software as a service, that we will discuss, right? So I will only pay amount basis on that triggers on the services which provider delivered to me. Then rapid elasticity. So when I'm saying that rapid elasticity, let's suppose I have a server, right? And it is using 8 GB of RAM, right? And I enable that elasticity feature on it. So today I have some sale option, or if let's suppose it is a web service, right? And today the traffic is increased, and the requirement of 8 GB is now almost fulfilled, right? Due to that rapid elasticity, this server will automatically get another 8 GB of RAM, right? As the demand will increase, it will automatically add memories or CPUs or a storage, automatically add. And as soon as your demand decrease, it will automatically shrink, right? So this is the feature of rapid elasticity. You do not need to be worried about your server resources, right? If But guys, again, I'm saying that if let's suppose you launch EC2, right, or if you launch any service which is managed by you, until you will not enable that feature, they will not take care of your elasticity. After launching that server, you have to enable the rep elasticity feature. Like if some servers are behind that load balancer, until you will not enable the scalability option, they will not add it. Yes, they will manage that, but you have to also enable that feature, right? So these are the some characteristics of cloud computing: on-demand self-service, resource pooling, broad network access, rapid elasticity, and myriad services. Okay, guys, this is very, very, very important, right? So whatever we will discuss in this 3 months of course, right? Every application we will launch, right? Or if we are going to design anything, we always have these three categories in our mind, right? Until these categories are not in our mind, we cannot be a good engineer, right? We can't design anything. Okay, so let's discuss again, right? So guys, if you have any query, right, ask me number of queries about this categorization, right? Because this should be very clear in your mind. So first, let's take an example of on-prem environment. So in on-prem environment, this is you managed Plue, right? So my company is managing networking. So even hardware, we are managing the physical infra. I will say physical infra in terms of power, right? Then power redundancies in terms of DG or direct electricity or redundant power supply, hardware, networking. In networking, we will take care of routing. We will take care of switching ports, right? If our switch should not broadcast or not goes down, in terms of storage, where our server's data will save. Then the physical server, mm, the virtualization, right? A hypervisor, how to patch that hypervisor, how to manage the hypervisor security, that operating system, if I'm purchasing Windows a license or whether I'm going with the Red Hat, right? Which license? Then I have to take care of patching as well, every weekly or monthly patching. Then whatever the middleware application we installed on that operating system, then their application runtime, all the compatibilities, then the data, right? Whatever the data it will generate, and again the application uptime. So everything is managed by us, right? If we have to migrate our services to the cloud, right, we have to first think that, or even business is asking that, okay, we want to migrate our services to the cloud, right? You have to ensure that, okay, which category is more convenient for that, right? So before discussing that, this is less cheaper, this is more cheaper than infrastructure as a service, and this is costliest among all three. right? But this has more benefits. We can transfer more responsibilities to that cloud service provider. So let's discuss this one by one. So in a infrastructure as a service, right? You do not need to be worried about a physical infra. You do not need to be worried about networking resources. You do like routing or their switching or redundant connectivity. You do not need to be worried about that storage SAN or a NAS server where your data is storing, right? In terms of servers, you do not need to be worried about that physical server or a virtual server requirement, right? Whatever the requirement you have, just select it and launch it. And as your most of the servers will be a virtual servers, right? Then they will deploy on one of any hypervisor engine or any ESXi VMware server, right? Management server. So how they will configuring that management server, how they are enabling that management level security, right? How they are patching, how they are updating, how they are upgrading, how they are maintaining that downtimes. You do not need to worry about any of these things. So only thing you have to worry about that they will provide you one machine. You have to install one operating system. That operating system you will launch. You will select that I need Windows 2016 server, right? You have to install it. You have to select it. I mean, when you will select it, it will be automatically installed. But yes, you have to be take care of their patching, right? Because you are now managing the OS. So it is your decision whether you want to install that patch weekly basis or a monthly basis. And the next thing is that to, as you know, that whenever we install any patch, that machine needs a reboot, right? So you have to be worry about that downtime. If you are running any application that is 24/7, right? Then how you will manage the patching downtime, right? You need to worry. Then whatever the application you want to install, you have to install, you have to take care of that application license, then application runtime, right? Their performance and the data which it will save on that cloud, where you will take a backup, your responsibility, how you will protect from viruses, then application itself, application configurations, right? So everything you have to manage in that. These are the four parts: networking, storage, servers, and virtualization. You do not need to worry. But if let's suppose you don't want to manage the operating system as well, right? You are saying that a cloud service provider manage the operating system licenses. Like I will just tell you that I need this application to run. So they will create server with that operating system, right? And they will patch that operating system. They will take care of that operating system security. They will take care of that downtimes, everything, right? For me, I need this a server 24/7, right? So in platform as a service, you do not need to be worried about that operating system license, their patching, their middleware application, and their runtime, right? They will provide you. Let's suppose you have one Python code or a Java code, right? So in that platform as a service, like a web app service, you will say that, okay, I will run my application on this Python 11.3.x code, right? So I will run this. So they will see is that, okay, for Python, they have a Linux server or a Windows server, which is more compatible, which is not creating more problems in terms of their connectivity with the kernel processing. So they will manage the operating system, right? How it will work. So once your code will execute, you just need to worry about that data, right? And the application itself. But if you even don't want to manage about that data or application, you are saying that we are just migrating to that cloud, everything needs to be managed by a cloud service provider, because we do not have a very good IT team, right? Or we do not have much resources to manage that, right? Then you will pick a software as a service, right? So in software as a service, you do not need to be worried about physical things, networking, storage, servers, virtualizations, operating system, middleware, runtime, data, and the application. Yeah. Whatever the data it will store, cloud service providers' responsibility is to take that backup, to secure that backup from the viruses, right? For that application, they will ensure that all the security settings on that application is enabled. I am taking example of uh, l- like in earlier we were using Microsoft Exchange, right? So in that Microsoft Exchange, we were deploying that on the server, so we were taking care of that application security. App- but now if you will launch, if you will migrate your Microsoft Exchange to Office 365, right? In Office 365, what you need, you just need https dot www dot office365.com, go to that their inbox services or email services, create services. So you do not need to be worried about that uptime, how they on the back end they are updating their servers, managing the patching. You are not aware about that, even you don't bother about that, right? When you are storing any data in the draft or in the drives, right? This is cloud service provider's responsibility, how they are protecting that Office 365 services from the DDoS attack, right? Or cross-site scripting attacks. So application security is also managed by them, right? And even if, let's suppose, DDoS is generated for that specific region, how they are managing that redundancy of their application with the multiple availability zones or the regions, right? So they will manage that. So in the software as a service, most of the responsibilities will be managed by cloud service provider, guys. But one thing always keep in mind, even in the software as a service, if you are saying that everything is managed by cloud service provider, but legally, right? Because when your organization signs any contract with a client, right? The legally, if any breach happens, right? Your organization will be responsible for that in court, right? You have to justify that, or you have to bear all the penalty. But yes, you can also set a penalty in the SLAs that if service that goes down, right, then cloud service provider has to pay me for that, right? Or if they are giving you any SLA or a contract, you have to ensure that what uptime they are providing. This is not in your exam. I'm just telling in terms of that governance perspective or from a compliance perspective. Only one thing you need to be worried about, not worry about you should aware that legally your organization will be responsible for, because client was not saying if you government is your client or you are providing services to the government is not telling you that okay, migrate my services to the cloud. This is your decision, right? So you are choosing as per your business requirement, but at the end legally whatever will happen, cloud service provider will not be responsible, your organization will be responsible. Okay, so if someone has a questions about that cloud categories, ask me please after this. And another important thing is cloud models, right? So when I'm saying that cloud models, we have basically four types of cloud models. Public public cloud, sorry. So when I'm saying public cloud, we have already taken multiple examples, right? So one platform which is accessible for everyone, even if it is any organization, enterprise organization, or a single user or a student, right? Who just what you guys need, just access it over the internet on the HTTPS, right? So create one account on that, and once you create an account you can access that. And as I said that this works on that tenancy model, right? So on shared pool of resources. So shared pool of resources, if X number of users will create that services, right? They will not launch their services to that dedicated hardware. They will launch that services to that shared pool of resources. Okay. So when I'm saying private cloud, right? So that private cloud is a dedicated data center, a dedicated data center that is accessible only for that specific organizations, right? So governments mostly have their own private cloud, which is also accessible from internet, but you can set the security that, okay, if like in India, right, if they want to launch their services to the cloud or a private cloud, if they have their, they can set the policies, geo policies, that my request will be only accept from the India IPs, right? So that will be accessible for only one organization. So when I'm saying a community cloud, right? So community cloud is a cloud which is managed by group of organizations. So when I'm saying group of organization, so best example is, let's suppose you have a two organizations, right? Uh, one is IBM and second is HDFC, right? So this is a financial bank, right? So that financial bank has their services on the cloud, right? And IBM is their service partner who is managing their data, who is managing the data security and the uptime of their application, right? So they created one common data center, right, through which all the internet users can access their services. But from a management perspective, from a security perspective, if someone has to check or troubleshoot, that only IBM users or that HDFC users can access. No internet users can directly access that and use their cloud for their own requirement or for that services. So this is called community cloud, right? Or like in the government organizations, like in government organizations, let's suppose we have we have one central government cloud, and we are sharing that cloud with ISRO, all right? So now if two different entities are accessing that common cloud, and both their engineers are managing the security of that cloud, so this is a shared cloud, but that shared cloud is not publicly available. That is available for that two or might be three entities, right? So then we will say it is a community cloud. The last thing which we will discuss is hybrid cloud. So guys, generally you will get work on public cloud or a hybrid cloud, right? So what is hybrid cloud? So hybrid cloud is, okay, so a hybrid cloud we can divide in, one is hybrid cloud on one is multi-cloud. So sometimes multi-cloud also covered in that hybrid cloud, so we will discuss both, right? So hybrid cloud means there might be a, okay, let's suppose this is my cloud, right? And this is my office, right? If that users in the organization, or let's suppose a remote user who is like my website is on the cloud, right? My organization's website is on the cloud, like if we are taking example of our SIANET portal, right? So that we have deployed on the cloud. So when you guys are accessing that, you are accessing over the internet. The website executed launches on the server which is on the cloud. That is fine. You are using currently public cloud. But when you put username and password, right? We have a database in our on-prem environment. So whatever the users are authorized, right? We are entering that details on our internal database. So when you raise a request for authentication, you put username and password, that web server will send that query over the SAML to my database to verify that whether this user is authorized. Yes, if your user is authorized, it will send you, yes, this user is authorized. He will give you response. Based on that, you will allow user to connect, right? So in one single service, I am using two resources. One resource is in cloud and one resource is in my on-prem environment. Or similarly, let's suppose you have any application which is on the cloud, right? If you are using multi-factor authentication and your RSA server or a OpenID or any IDP or Google authentication or Microsoft Azure authentication app is deployed on the cloud, right? The request will hit to the your office network or your office data center. It will verify username and password. He will says that okay, username password is correct, but you must have a multi-factor authentication, and then from that user application you will generate one request to that same cloud for authentication. Once the MFA is completed, you will able to log in. So in that single service, when you are using resources from on two different locations, or sorry, on two different services, one is on the cloud and one is on-prem, so that covers under a hybrid model. So similarly, if some of my application is in AWS, my web services or my coding or my testing application is on this, right? But I am managing that Active Directory of Microsoft Azure, right? Azure Active Directory. So user will have to come to AWS to access that services, but for that login, I am now not using Active Directory in the on-prem environment. I'm using directly that Microsoft Azure Active Directory. So for authentication, some request will hit to Microsoft Cloud, and once it will be authenticated with that token, I can access services on the AWS cloud. So that combination of two cloud providers comes under a multi-cloud service, right? Which also covers in that hybrid cloud model. So public cloud model, we understand. Private cloud model, we understand. Community cloud, we understand. Hybrid cloud, we understand, right? So if someone has any questions, ask me after this class. Okay, so now we will start technically regions and availability zones, right? Okay, so let me jump to the another PPT. So this was the PPT for a demo session. One second. Let me open that. Is my screen visible now? Hemu, is my screen visible? Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. So first of all, we will cover what is region, right? So region is nothing, just a location specific. Uh, so if this is my world map, right? So n- I have some data centers in India, right? So that India will be considered as a one region. In Europe, I have a multiple, I have some U regions in UK, some regions in France, some regions in Germany, right? Similarly, in US, Northeast, Northwest, Latin America, right? So these all are regions, right? So why we are you launching multiple regions, right? So if let's suppose my users are in India, they will definitely launch their services in the India region. They can launch that regions in the Singapore or in the Hong Kong region, but every user will or every organization will choose a nearest location for two reasons. One, from a compliance perspective, and second, from performance perspective. How, like in your region, right? If you have a sensitive data, then you cannot move that data outside to the Europe. So this comes under GDPR compliance. Now, like in Russia recently 2 years back changed their compliance. So whatever the data in the Russia, even if you are putting that data in the cloud service provider cannot use that data outside the Russia. So if they have to manage their services, if they want to provide that services, they have to build their all data centers within the Russia, right? Similarly, for Indian government, if you government is using that cloud services, they will set some SLAs that my data should not go outside my country, right? So to fulfill the compliance requirements, regulatory requirements, we use our nearest region. Second, in terms of performance, if I will deploy one website and that website is now in Hong Kong, right? Rather than accessing that website from Delhi to Mumbai, right? If I will access that website over Hong Kong, right, I will get a more latency. I will get a better performance in Mumbai, correct? So I will tell you, because in the exam you will get one simple question of 2 marks, that what is the naming convention of region, right? They will give you for like US East 1A or US East hyphen 1A. Similarly, they will give you four and you have to select that which is the correct format of region naming convention, right? You will definitely get that because in every exam they will give you 1 2 marks of question from the naming convention, or that naming convention might be for a region or for a availability zone. And second thing, let's suppose if I have launched one application on that Mumbai region, right? And to manage that high availability, I will also pick one nearest region like Singapore, right? Pick why? Because in case if that region goes down due to any disaster recovery, right? If due to any natural calamity, if that region goes down, right, then w- do I have a backup of my data, right? For that, I will select a separate region from where I can take all the backup or I can restore my services, right? So this is also helpful for high availability, for low latencies, and from governance regulation perspective. Clear? So we already covered that. Choose the right region based on choose the right region based on where your users are located first, right? So if your office is in India, right, then you have to pick the regions within that India. Second, where your data is located, right? And like as I said that for that high availability, right? uh, if your office is in UK, right, you cannot pick that in the second data in the China or in US, right? Because you have GDPR compliance for that data, right? So you have to select that region for redundancy perspective within that Europe. Regulatory and security compliances. Regulatory and some security compliance you have to always keep in mind when you are launching that. AWS service can be regional or global, that we will discuss. I hope you guys understand basically what is region. We will tell you, you will have a more clarity when we will log into that AWS console. And in that availability zone, right? Oh, sorry, in that region, we have a availability zones. So when I'm saying that availability zone, right? So as I said that now I select US West region, right? So I will launch my services in that region because my office is in US West. So in that US West, I will further create two availability zones. When I'm saying two availability zones, actually I will not create that. Cloud service provider will give me the options of multiple availability zones. In every region, they will give you at least two availability zones, AV1, AZ1, and AZ2. In some regions, you will get three availability zones, and maximum you will get five availability zones. So what it means, when within that region, they will give you a set of data centers, right? So that availability zone is nothing just a one data center. So why they are creating two data centers in one region? Because if one data center goes down due to power or due to internet connectivity or due to that ISP line cut or any reason, sorry, right? If that one data center goes down, you should have your services in the another availability zone, right? And that distance, it is not like that both availability zones will be on that same building. If I'm taking example of Mumbai, right? If I'm launching my services in India in the Mumbai region, right? Then there one data center will be in Thane and another will be in Borivali, right? They will maintain 10 kilometers of distance, right? Because if due to any natural calamity, due to flood, if anything goes down with their one data center, you can access your services within same region from a different availability zones, right? So they will provide you all the options, but again, you have to launch their services on both availability zones if you are using infrastructure as a service category. We will show you that how we can select that, right? So region is a geographical location where you will launch your services, and within that region, to provide redundancies, they are creating availability zones, right? So we can use our own subnets on that, or we can also go with that default subnets. We will cover that. I hope you guys understand what is availability zone. So now let's read the definition. So isolated locations in the region. So within one region, if they are having a two isolated locations, one data center and second data center, both will be on a separate locations. Each AWS region has at least two availability zones, right? You will have three, four, five, but when they are launching regions, right, they are ensuring that to provide that redundancies or HA, they should have two availability zones, increase availability of application in that same region. We have already covered that. Now, in AWS global data centers, we have a multiple regions, right? And every year they are launching multiple regions, right? Now, like we have a 22 regions, and as in this, they were saying that 20 regions and five are upcoming, right? So now three are left, and there might be a possibilities that by end of this 2023, they will launch more regions, right? Similarly, we have a 61 availability zones. You will see many availability zones in that US region, right? Similarly in Europe, right? So as I said that in one region, they will ensure at least one, two availability zones, and sometimes it will be three, four, five. We also have one term called edge location. We will cover that in very detail in CDN, content delivery network. So what is that edge location, right? So that edge location is nothing, just a caching point. Through that you will get a better performance, or you will get that web services, right? So if, let's suppose, your server is deployed in the US region, right? Because your offices are also in US, and they are providing that web services, rather than the users are in the Singapore or Sydney, they wants to access that service over this long distance, right? They will enable that edge location services, so that users who are on the different regions can, if I have a edge service in Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, right? So the Australian users can access that services f- through that nearest edge location. So whenever I will update anything on that my main server after some TTL value updates, or even if I want, I can clear that cache and update that services, and that will reflect to my edge location. So that edge location is mostly used to provide a better performance of services globally. So edge service is again one terminology for that is content delivery network. We will do all the practicals, right? But this is mostly used to provide the services for the global users or a global services. Then for that edge locations, that edge locations are available in 11 regions, right? So currently that caching service is not available in all the regions, right? So when you have to select that region, you have to ensure that on that region whether we have services. So we have 150 plus now services in the AWS, right? So we will cover all that in detail. Okay, so this is very important. This is very important, right? So whenever you will do a practical, right? So I will tell you that how to enable a billing alerts, right? Set one threshold, that minimum $1 or even a $0 for a billing alert if you are launching any service, and that is not under a free tier, right? You will automatically get a billing alert. I will tell you how to enable that billing alert. Monitor your billing dashboard every day, right? Because if you will not monitor that, after 1 month they will give you, okay, this is your payment, you have to pay for that. And if you will not pay for that, after waiting 2 or 3 months, they will terminate your account, right? So always monitor your billing dashboard. Stop resources when you are not using them, right? Let's suppose you have performed your practicals and now you don't want, you have to shut down. Because let's suppose if I have launched one EC2 machine, right? And it is free for, let's suppose, 780 hours for 1 month, right? And if it is keep running, right, after completing that 780 hours, they will charge me for that. If I'm taking example of load balancers, right, it will charge me for 1 hour, right? Or let's take a random example, for 8 hours that service is free, and you forget, to launch that, shut down that service after 8 hours. After 8 hours, then they will start charging you for every hour after 8 hours. And the second thing is that when you're not using them, let's suppose you launched one server, right? And when you launched that server is also using a public IP, because you have not shut down that server, so you are not releasing that public IP, so they will charge you for that public IP. I'm taking example of elastic IP. We will cover that. I will ping you this link on the chat right after this class. You always save this link on the bookmarks, so that whenever you are going to launch any service, you just read that whether this service is under free tier or not. If not in free tier, how much they will charge, because some services are very costly, right? And some are still manageable. For that we can launch, and then after our lab we can pay that. Okay, so now let's jump to. Okay, so Close this. This is my AWS Management Console, right? Go to Google, search AWS Management Console. Click it here, right? So you will get this option. Sign in if you want to sign in, because I have already logged in, it is giving me. Otherwise, you can create one account through that sign up. So only thing on the Google, you just need to type AWS Management Console. They will give you option to sign up, and in that sign up, they will ask you to provide your identity details in terms of any credit card or a debit card, right? And they will charge you 2 rupees, right? And once you will be authenticated and authorized, your account will be logged in. So once you will logged in, right, you will get this dashboard, right? So in this dashboard, as I said, if these are my regions, right? These are list of regions. If let's suppose I'm taking example of EC2, as I said that if I have to launch my servers, I will select EC2. If now I will create a server, if I will launch my server, right, that server will be deployed in North Virginia, right? And if let's suppose my users, sorry, it is taking time. If let's suppose my organization is in Europe, right, and I have to deploy that server in London region, from here I will select London region, and now I am on Europe portal, right? So from there, I can launch my EC2 instance, and that will be deployed in London. Similarly, for India, this is for South. Okay, one more thing, right? So some of their regions are currently disabled, right? There are 11 regions that are not enabled for this account, right? So like in they have recently deployed one data center in Hyderabad, Mumbai region. You will see in Asia, we have a Mumbai, right? So Indian organizations are launching all their services to the Mumbai. Now they see that n number of organizations are using their resources. So to provide a better redundancies and to better performance, they created one more data center in that Hyderabad. But why it is disabled, they are not preferring, because currently if I have a 200 services, right? So if let's suppose, let's take an example of compute, right? Within that compute, these are n number of services, right? For database, they have a n number of databases, right? So if that currently services are not available for that region, right, then they will disable that. If I have to enable that region, because I have a requirement, I have to launch EC2 and the databases, but I will not use Lambda services. I know that Lambda services is not available in Hyderabad or in Spain, right? I will say, click on that. Once you log in, you will see the regions at, mm, and you will see manage regions. Scroll down, right? So from here you can enable your region. So let's suppose if I will enable that, right, it will give me some option that some of the services are not available. Let's suppose, okay, you see that you cannot control whether you, when you enable AWS perform action to prepare your account, such as distributed this, okay, like session tokens, AWS security tokens are not valid in that AWS region, right? So if I have to use a temporary credentials, right, then that temporary credentials will not work for federated users. So if I'm saying that I have to provide that access to the guest users for some of the services, and if I will launch that in that Hyderabad location, it will not work. So I will prefer this these regions. Okay. So as I said earlier, that some of the applications are region specific and some are a global services. Now let's take an example of identity access management, which we will cover today. All right. So when I will see identity access management, now I am not seeing any region. All right. I cannot select because this identity access management is a global service. So if I will create any user, or if I will create any policy, or if I will create any role, right, it will not be a region specific that this users will be only able to log into that North Virginia or California services, right? If I will create that user, that users can be authenticated to any service which is in Asia or in US or in Europe, correct? So you have to keep in mind, like I am, if let's suppose talk about S3 simple storage service, create bucket. I'm launching a bucket, right? Here I am selecting that on which region I have to use that, right? But as a S3 server service, this is a global service. So why I will tell you some organizational concepts, right? So similarly, if I'm using any load balancer, on which region I have to select that. So we have to see it from here. So let's talk about, okay, I will also cover that billing part, right? So once you will create your account, right? So how to check a billing dashboard? Click on your user, click billing dashboard. In that billing dashboard, you can see that, okay, so currently these are the total 10 active services. How many AWS accounts? If this is my root account, so it will definitely show you that, and how many regions your services are currently running. So in 2 regions, my services are running. So how much data you have transferred, right? So you can see all these details from that billing dashboard. Correct. So in terms of bills, if somebody will says that, okay, give me the report of last month, right? You can select that report for all your previous months from here, right? You can print or you can download that, right? So these are the current services I launched some time back, right? So it is showing in my free tier. So to enable the billing alerts, what you have to do, again, I will show you, select your user, go to that billing dashboard. Once you will go to that billing dashboard, select billing preference, and in the billing preference, right, because I have already enabled it, because once you will click on that billing preference, you will get option to enable the billing preference. So once you will create a billing preference enable, right, so then it will show you. Guys, 1 second, I'm taking 1 minute of break. 1 second. Sorry, back. Right, so where we were. Okay, so I have already covered how we can see the bills, right? So click on a user, go to that billing dashboard. You will get this billing dashboard from where you can see that what is the current services you are using. If you want to generate that bills, you can click on bills. If you want to change your credit card details or debit card details of your organization, click on this payment details and you can modify your details. I will not show you my details. All right, in terms of billing preferences, go to that billing preferences and enable this services, right? You will get either here enable or activate alerts, right? So once you will enable that alert, right? Guys, note it down on the notepad, right? Because this is very important. We have one service that is called CloudWatch. So as you see that this service is used to monitor your resource applications, and it will also help you to generate alarms. So I will go to CloudWatch. I hope you all guys are noted it down, right? So when on the services, you will select CloudWatch. So CloudWatch is a monitoring service, right, which will monitor your resources, your applications, and generate alerts. So now I am using this service even for generating my billing alarms. So what I will do, I will click on alarm, right? So currently I have not created any alarm. Click on create alarm. Sorry, I have to be for all the matrices. Let's suppose for usage by AWS resources. Let's suppose if I'm taking example for EC2. Right. Okay. So whenever my EC2 services number of EC2s increased from 1 to 2, right, I will create one topic. It will generate me a CloudWatch alarm. And this will be a subject name of that alarm. Then I will create one topic and I will add n number of emails or the DL accounts. Right, alarm name, EC2 machines. Next, the alarm is ready, right? So here I set alarm for EC2. If let's suppose I have to set alarm for billing perspective, I can create that alarm as well. I Because I currently don't have any EC2 machine on here. So one alarm is showing there is ready. So whenever that EC2 machine will be launched, so I'm moving back to here, all alarms, create alarm. So similarly, whatever the service you want and on which region you want to launch, for that you can create a alarm. Clear? Now let me tell you before moving to this. So this is my dashboard, billing dashboard, through which we can see the reports. And now we will cover what is identity and access management. So this is very important topic. Okay, so IAM is identity and access management. So in that identity and access management, when we have a resources and identities in the cloud. So resources might be a servers, or might be any application, infrastructure as a service platform, or a software as a service application. These identities will be we. It might be a humans or a users, or if we are using any account in the script or in the program, right, which will authenticate, non-human service or application wants to access that resource or that server or that device, we use one service called IAM, identity access management. So one second, guys, one second. Identity and access. So in we will discussing about that identity and access management, right? So in that identity and access management, it is just like users which we are creating, right? So we will create users and that users will be authenticated, authorized based on our roles and the policies. So now let's jump to our IAM. Guys, this is not like that if I'm discussing this app service one time, right, then we will not discuss, because when we will launch servers, when we will launch DNS services, every time we have to move back to IAM, every time we have to move back to that CloudWatch, right? So these all applications and the services are interconnected, right? So once today you will create a AWS account, go to that IAM service. In that IAM services, you will see these options. So we will cover today very basics, right? So how we can create a user. I clicked on user. So you can create username like user this. And now we have a two types of access, whether we just want to provide that management console access uh, or programmatic access, that we will also cover, right? So we created one account. I want to create IAM user. So you want to auto generate that password or you want to create your own password. So let's suppose I created one password for that. Click on that, right? Whether you want to create one group for that user or you want to copy the permission for that. If I have, let's suppose, another user, right? So they will show you that user on there. So you do not need to again enable all the policies for that user. So just copy the policies from that specific user, or if you have already a policies, then you just select it here. And let's suppose I want to give this user access of my all type of EC2 services, Elastic Cloud Computing services. I will select that service. And now one user is created. Okay, so when so when I created this user, they gave me this console, right? So if let's suppose I have to give this console to the user who is created, right? So this is my account ID. They will put that username and password and they will able to login. One second, let me log in back to my root user. Right, so I'm again move back to my IAM services. So again, as I said, that this is a global service, right? So you have to remember that IAM is a global service, EC2 is a region specific service. So I created one user, right? Let's suppose I have to create one more user. I created one more user, provide management console access to that user. I want to create IAM user, custom password. I created one password. Once that user will log in, if he wants to change the password, you can enable it, right? So that user can change that password. Click on next, right? So now, do you want to add that user to group? We have not discussed that groups, right? So whether you want to copy that permissions, because that my earlier user was having a full access of EC2, so I will select here EC2. If I don't want, because if that user has I have to give a multiple access to that user, and that same access for that same team member has been already provided, I will select copy permissions. So I will select this user. So my new user will copy that same permissions which are already given to this user, right? So we have three types of options. We can attach policies. Policies means that access permissions to that users. Copy if you want to copy, or if you have already given some access to that users, so we can create it from here. So right, so the return to user list. Okay, no problem, because we will not use that. So similarly, you guys just try to create users, see the options, and now we will cover user groups. We will discuss this theoretically as well, right? But now let's first understand how we create a groups. Create a group. Lab user group. I created one group, right? And I added one user to this, and S3 full access. I'm just taking one random example of any of the application, right? So don't worry about that. We will discuss that in detail. So I created one group, right? So now this user Manpreet10824, who has already access of EC2, is now part of that user group that was test group. So on that test group, we have give the permissions to S3, right? So the user will automatically get access of S3 because that user is part of this group. And if I want to add one more user, so click on that group name, add user. Right. So you will see that list of users, select that and add user. Now this user is also having that same permissions which we have given to that group, right? So we have users. From here we can create users, uh, and if you want to give the permissions to that user, so best practices is always create groups. Like if we have a IT team, we have a marketing team, we have a HR team, right? So create that n number of groups and give that policies. So these are the list of policies. So we will cover that in detail. Like we have a managed policy, AWS policy, custom policies, inline policies, right? So let's go back to some theoretical part, right? So in IAM, we have resources. Resources means servers or the services which will be accessible by identities. Identities can be users, right, or non-human application or services. So we will provide authentication and authorization that we will cover in our policies, how we can modify. And this is not that the users which we have created on this identity and access management portal only, that they can log in with that details or authenticate. We can use external users, federated users, authentication and authorization. Like if I have users on my internal AD group, right, and that internal internal Active Directory, that Active Directory users can also be authenticated on the AWS portal, right? How we can do that? We will do that in the practical. So remember, IAM is a global service, centralized service to manage all AWS services. So if I will read the definition, so what is identity access management? You can use AWS IAM to securely control individual means user, or a group access. Guys, 1 second. So individual or user or a group access, like if we have created a group, right? So to assign that policies to that group, we can access that resources. So you can create and manage user identities. So identities means your IAM users, and grant permission to those IAM users to access your resources. You can also grant permissions to that users outside of AWS, right? So as I said, that if you are using your internal Active Directory and you want that same users can be authenticated for that cloud services, rather than creating a new list of users on the cloud, we can do that. For that, we can connect our Active Directory with that cloud, right? So in IAM, we have 4 important components in identity and access management. One is user, one is group, one is policy, and one is role, right? So in next session, we will again discuss that what is identity and access management, and we will start from user, group, policies, and roles. I will just show you that, like in policies, we have a custom policies, inline policies, AWS managed policies, how we can create policies, how we can modify that policies, right? So all these details we will cover in next sessions. So let's revise what we have covered today. So we know we have covered categories, right? Infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and a software as a service. So this is very important. You must understand the categories: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. If I will pick infrastructure as a service, then what services will I have to manage, and what services cloud service provider will manage, right? So you should know what is your responsibility and what is cloud service provider's responsibility. And if I will go to platform as a service, then what will be their responsibility and what will be my. Similarly, for a software as a service. So to pick that category, you have to also keep in mind the cost, right? We have discussed this cloud categories. So if you have any questions, ask me on that. Then we have discussed cloud models: public model, private model, community model, and hybrid cloud model. So we now understand that what is hybrid cloud model when some services are on the cloud and some services are in our on-prem environment or on another cloud, right? Then we will consider that as a hybrid cloud. These two regions you already know. Availabilities we have already discussed, right? So the regions we have discussed, availability zones we have discussed, right? And as I said that how you can see the billing alerts, how you can see that dashboard, right? Whenever you are not using any services, stop that service. Uh, this is the example of that billing dashboard. Then we just touched what is IAM, right? So we will cover that in very detail in next sessions, right? So how we can create users, how we can create groups, how we can call that users to the group, right? So basically we have just overview today that what is cloud, what are their services, what are the regional services, right? And what are their global services, right? You once you will log into once you will create your account on the AWS, right? And once you will access that services one by one, you will get a better clarity, because I hope most of you guys are first time seeing that AWS dashboards, right? So it might be little new for you, right? So once you will create your accounts on that and you will access that services or you will explore that services, okay, this is a global services, okay, these are the regions, how we can manage that regions. If I am in Europe, then I have to pick my nearest region, right? How I can see my billing dashboard, right? All these things, what is my account ID? So all these things we can see, and once you will explore that, you will get a better clarity. But still, if you have any queries, I will be happy to answer all your queries, right? Okay, so now it's over to you. So if you have any questions in today's session, ask me.